And it's our final pre-draft visit with senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, as he has been helping us navigate most of the position groups in this year's draft pool. And today, we go to a position that has been mocked a little bit more and more with each passing week at pick 25 for the Bills. And, you know, the most popular name has been Iowa State's Breece Hall. But Greg Cosell, you need to tell us, is Breece Hall the unequivocal best back in the class? Because there seems to be some contingent of draftniks, and who knows, maybe some personnel executives, that like Kenneth Walker III better than Breece Hall.
Yeah, you know, again, that's always in the eye of the beholder. I would probably like Hall a little more. If I had to pick one back in the draft, I would probably pick Breece Hall. I think he's the total package. I think Walker is a really good runner, and at this point, you don't know exactly what he gives you in the pass game. Maybe he'll give you a lot, but you didn't see that on tape, whereas Hall, I think you get a better feel for Hall in the pass game than you do Walker. So I like Breece Hall. He would probably be my number one. I think it'd be interesting and again, no team at this point really tells you what they're going to do. But we saw what they did kind of down the stretch with Singletary. We know that it's still going to be a pass-first team with Josh Allen. I just wonder, guys, if running back would be a position they would feel they had to get in the first round.
Right. Is there any of these guys that you think is a significant, maybe major upgrade over what Devin Singletary gave him in the last month of last season?
Well, I think if you're talking about just talent level, you'd probably say yes to that, Steve. Maybe significance too strong, but I think Breece Hall has better traits than Singletary. But the question becomes, how do they see their offense? And if the offense can essentially run the same way, does Singletary do what they want to do? And the other unknown is, what does Ken Dorsey bring to the equation? Because obviously it's a different coordinator. He's not going to change anything dramatically. We know that. But we do know that a new coordinator, even one that's been there, does make a tweak here and there. So we don't know how he sees the offense in terms of the running game.
How does, and I'm talking about Buffalo's roster now, how does Duke Johnson change all of this mix? I mean, he's coming over. They've got him under contract. How does that change your view of the Bills running back room before you pick a guy like Breece Hall?
And that's why I'm just wondering if running back, and I know we want to talk about some here, but just wondering if running back would be the pick, because Duke Johnson is actually a pretty good back who's an excellent receiver, and you can run him enough within the context of what the Bills like to do or have shown what they want to do under Brian Daboll. So unless Ken Dorsey's thinking to make a meaningful change, which I doubt would be the case, then Duke Johnson does add effectively into that mix because of his running, receiving combination traits.
And I would tend to agree with you, Greg. I think a running back in the first round to the Bills happens only as a pure contingency plan if the value at the other perceived need positions is absolute garbage when they're on the clock. That being said, I think the other thing we need to note here is they have a new offensive line coach in Aaron Kromer as well.
Yes,
and
they do.
I know he's coached a bunch of different schemes, but when he was here, I mean, the team went back-to-back number one in the league in rushing. Now, I'm not saying this team's going to suddenly become a rushing team. You're not going to do that with Josh Allen at quarterback. But I don't know, just based on your historical knowledge of what Kromer has done with respect to the blocking schemes and such, could you foresee tweaks in that area as well?
Yes. And well, we all agree that it's still Josh Allen's offense.
Yes.
I think the one thing that could well change, unless it's absolutely needed in a given game, is the amount of design runs for Josh. Because I think you have to start to be careful about that. No matter how big he is, no matter how tough he is, you just can't live like that in this league over a long period of time without some attrition to his body. So it's very possible they could see the run game with Aaron Kromer as being a little bit more a part of what they want to do, take away some of the design runs with Josh, because I personally don't believe that's tenable over a long period of time.
And then with respect to some of these backs, I think people are pretty familiar with Hall and Walker at this point. Isaiah Spiller is a player that did make a 30 visit here to One Bills Drive. What is your thumbnail sketch of him?
Yeah, see, it's interesting because I like Isaiah Spiller, but I just wonder when all's said and done if he fits ultimately what they want. Because to me, Isaiah Spiller is a sustaining back who needs volume. I think that's the kind of runner he is. He's got size. Got a compact build. He's a good runner, patience, vision, short area burst. He works really well in confined space. But he struck me, and I watched his tape from 2020 and from 2021. He actually struck me as a volume runner. And they may like the back, and I think a lot of teams will like Isaiah Spiller because he has very good running traits. But I think ultimately he's an attitude runner who needs carries. And I just don't sense that that's what this offense is going to be.
Yeah, and as we go on further, what are some of the other backs like this James Cook from Georgia
and his teammate
and his teammate?
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned James Cook because he's a back I really, really like. Now, I think he actually fits the Bills because James Cook is not a volume runner. James Cook is an explosive back and an outstanding receiver. I almost finished watching James Cook, who, by the way, if people don't know, is Dalvin Cook's younger brother, and actually looks like him when he runs. He's actually a very, very good runner. He's just not big enough to be a volume back. But I don't think the Bills need that. And he's an outstanding receiver who you can detach from the formation. He made some big plays as basically a wide receiver against Alabama in his career. I don't think he's quite the same level of player as an Alvin Kamara type back, but I think he's similar. I think he's actually similar in terms of how you would deploy him in the context of an offense.
Yeah,
so I really like James Cook.
I would agree with that because just in watching him, like if you go through the top 10 backs in this draft, I think you know what he is as a receiver maybe better than any of these other backs. I mean, they split him out wide in the red zone. We're watching footage of him as a direct snap guy, and he's used to playing a part-time role, which seemingly everybody does at Georgia because they're loaded with 5 stars, and nobody gets full-time jobs there apparently because they're so blessed with all this talent.
And he's only had 297 touches in his 4-year career at Georgia. So, he's got a lot of there's no wear and tear on his body at this point. And see, I think that kind of back, I mean, theoretically, to me, he's a better Duke Johnson because I think you can do more with James Cook in the passing game. But I think that kind of back, to me, fits the Bills because, look, no matter what Ken Dorsey thinks, and he may not think this at all, but the offense is not going to dramatically change. It's still Josh Allen's offense. Josh Allen's the reason you're doing what you're doing, and you're essentially very close to a Super Bowl team. You're not going to change the whole structure and philosophy of the offense.
Could a guy like James Cook be used like an Alvin Kamara kind of thing, but would he be there maybe at 25? Probably.
No, he's
for
probably
sure.
A second.
Could you get him at the 57th pick or maybe even the 89th pick of this draft?
Yeah, and that's the thing, Steve. I'm bad at that. And
I don't know either.
It always bothers me when I hear someone on TV say, well, they could have gotten him in the next round. You don't know that. Now, I'm not saying he should go at 26 if that's where they stay, right? 26?
Right.
25.
25.
But 25, I'm not saying he should or shouldn't, but let me say this. If you believe, let's forget about mock drafts and draft gurus. Maybe some people consider me that. That's irrelevant what anybody considers me. What I have to say is probably not paramount on the minds of coaches and general managers right now. But the point is, if you believe James Cook can do for your offense what Alvin Kamara does for the Saints offense, then isn't he a valuable pick?
Right. Doesn't matter where you pick him. He's going to be worth it.
Yeah. I mean, to say, well, you could have gotten him at 87. Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Well, then, how do you know that?
Well, yeah, okay, we'll take him at 89th, but who are we going to take at 57 and 25 then, right? I mean, who's going to be better than him?
Yeah, you have to decide. Look, you could easily argue that Isaiah Spiller is a better runner than James Cook, whether you want to believe that or not, because he's bigger and he can be a foundation back. But that's probably not what the Bills are looking for.
Right. Right.
And then his teammate at Georgia's, Amir White, was this highly touted high school player, but then
number one in the country.
Yeah, and had a couple of ACL injuries, and that kind of, I don't want to say it compromised his college career, but it certainly will throw up red flags on the medical to get those things checked out. But how is he different from Cook?
Oh, he's more of a pure runner. I mean, again, I don't know if at this point you'd say he's a true volume back, although his running style fits that. He's aggressive, he's physical, he's competitive, he's a downhill runner. He's got natural power, he's got strong finishing traits. He gets hard yards. I mean, as you said, Chris, he came out of I'm forgetting where he's from exactly, but he was a consensus 5-star recruit and the number one running back nationally. But he might have had 3 ACL injuries, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, okay.
Certainly,
he's out of North Carolina.
Yeah, that's right, North Carolina. But because of that, and because Georgia does get 5 stars, he didn't have one game in 2021 in which he had 20 carries. He only had 2 games in 2020 in which he had 20 carries. So he was never used as a volume runner simply because they get 5 stars every year. But like I said, stylistically, he is that kind of guy. I think he's really competitively tough. He's got power. I don't know if he's a foundation back anyway, just stylistically, although I do like the back. So he's not going to be a first round pick. That I can tell you for sure.
Yeah, he's like a one cut and go guy, right? Like
correct. He's very decisive. He can run in both zone and gap scheme. There's no hesitation, no uncertainty. He sees it and he goes. And it's 2 ACL tears, not 3, too.
He strikes me as a guy that would fit into Kyle Shanahan. Well, not that anybody wouldn't, but Kyle Shanahan's zone scheme kind of thing where you cut up, make one cut and then go vertical, right? Yeah, that's kind of scheme.
And he gets hard yards. I mean, he's one of those backs. He does not go down easy, and he gets the tough yards.
All right, let's talk about the running back out of BYU, Tyler, and I'm not sure how you say his name, Algier.
Tyler Algier.
What about him?
He's he's a big back. He's 225 pounds. I would say he's a really good zone runner. That's predominantly what he did at BYU. I thought he had a pretty subtle, nuanced feel for the zone run game. He's patient. He's disciplined. He's efficient. He's got good vision. He's a pace and tempo runner. He sort of waits to see it all happen. He's a pretty good back. I'd say at his core, he's a downhill north-south runner. He's kind of smooth and subtle in his lateral movement. He's not really a shifty guy, but you might even say he's a little tight-hipped. But I'm curious as to where he gets drafted and how he's seen in the NFL. You know who he struck me as? He struck me as a Jordan Howard kind of back. And, Jordan Howard did have his first 2 years in Chicago where he was a feature back and gained over 1,000 yards. Another back that came to mind when I watched Tyler Algier was the backup in Minnesota, Alexander Madison, who was a 3rd-round pick out of Boise State. Tyler Algier kind of reminds me of those kinds of backs.
Yeah, he's not an elusive guy, and evidence of that is, I think it's over 70% of his rushing yardage this past season came after contact. So that's both good and maybe bad.
Right. And he was a big-time foundation back at BYU. I mean, he had 8 games in this past season with more than 20 carries.
And then Brian Robinson Jr., the Alabama kid, tall kid, but I like the way he accelerates through holes. That's what kind of I noticed about him.
He was one of those guys, the more I watched, the more I liked. And I watched a lot of tape because I actually watched every single one of his runs in 2020 because I think he only had 93 of them and a ton of them from this year because I saw a ton of Alabama. They're another team that has, 100 guys that come out every year. I really like this kid. I mean, I think that he's urgent, he's physical, he's competitive, he runs with velocity and power. Another guy that gains hard yards, but there's also a little bit of a looseness to his running style. I don't know if I'd call him naturally shifty in that sense, but he's kind of loose. He can stop and start. He can change direction. And he's a good blocker, and he caught the ball. I like him maybe more than others do. Again, not saying where he'll get drafted, but I like Brian Robinson. And I would imagine, having been at Alabama for, 5 years, I believe, that he's probably pretty well schooled in a lot of the details of the game.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, some people have said that he kind of runs upright because he is so tall. I think it's more because he's tall that it looks like he's running upright. Is there a concern there about being exposed to bigger hits because of that?
I mean, I guess you can always say that, but I don't think he was an upright runner the way we think of upright runners. Like, I don't think he's Eric Dickerson upright. You know what I mean?
Okay.
I don't think he's that kind of upright. You can always say that about a taller back just because they're taller, but I don't think he ran straight up.
Yeah, I mean, they used to say that about Adrian Peterson, too, because the guy was 6'3".
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
All right, last
But I mean,
one for
even
me.
seeing these highlights, he never looked to me watching his tape where I felt like, oh man, this guy's tall. He doesn't run like that.
Right. All right, last one for me. The last running back, we're going to talk about running back Kyron Williams, the Notre Dame kid. Had just over 1,000 yards this last season, 14 touchdowns. What do you see about him?
Yeah, I'll make a comparison that I think fits perfectly, and people in Buffalo will understand immediately. I think he's James White. I don't think he's an NFL back in terms of, handing him the ball a lot. There's not a lot of juice to him. He's kind of an inside grinder. He's very competitive, very physical, but he's 5'9" and a quarter, 194. Now, you could make the argument that in an offense where the back theoretically will not be featured as the runner, you could make the argument that he could be maybe Austin Eckler, like with the Chargers, because Eckler's probably not going to get 250 carries. But I think when all's said and done, because Williams is a big-time blocker and a really good receiver, I think then you can say that he's James White. That is, to me, who I thought of when I finished watching Kyron Williams.
Yeah, the thing I like about him the most, Greg, is I don't know what it is. He seems to have this knack for maximizing the yardage on just about every time he touches the football.
Yeah, he does. And again, the fact that he lacks juice and explosiveness is not a big factor. He's a really good football player. He's just not good enough to be that guy. But if it's Buffalo, he doesn't have to be that guy.
Yeah,
he's not going to be a high pick.
Yeah,
he's not going to be a high pick because he's 5'9", 194, and he ran a 4.65, and his 10-yard split was awful, as far as running backs go. So he's not going to be a high pick, although he's a very good football player.
Right. Greg, good stuff as always. Appreciate it.
Enjoy the draft, and I guess we'll find out what the heck's happening at 25 in about a little under a week.
I think we probably will. And I'm just looking forward, guys, to when the draft is over and I can, actually maybe get a day off. I don't think I've had a day off since about August 10th.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, keep grinding, as they say, Greg.
That's what I'm doing.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks as always. Appreciate the time.
All right, guys. Thanks.
All right, that's senior NFL producer Greg Cosell joining us, breaking down the running backs.